I'm convinced that being an Everton supporter is a part of some kind of social experiment because it's just ridiculous how much this team sends their fan base on the brink. It just gives us so much hope. And it's just all in the bin in the final few minutes when it's too late to get anything back. This game was a 1-0 defeat. It shouldn't have been remotely close to that scoreline. It went in the exact same kind of way as the first game week against Fulham. The goalkeeper decided to have a world-class performance like the first game when Bernd Leno did it. It's just ridiculous, the amount of point-blank shots. To think that we could have had a striker at the start of the season and waited until now when 9 points have evaporated is quite unthinkable. But the good thing is that we're generating opportunities. That was a huge issue last season. A lot of fans are overreacting. A lot of people are saying we're getting relegated. A lot of people are saying that the game plan doesn't hold up. Deitch needs to go. I disagree with all of those things wholeheartedly because, quite frankly, we're only 3 games into the season. You'd think all is lost. And, we've got time to turn this around. And we've got reinforcements on the way. There actually is some form of confirmation in the form of signing Beto from Udinese. So we're going to get into the game discussion. But bloody hell, this team, every single damn fucking week. Now, I thought we were going to win the treble today because we had a team that we asked for in terms of no more pay, no Keane, Branthwaite and Dobbin starting, Danjuma also starting. So that was a great start. And then you also had the Beto signing being announced prior to the game. So we thought, oh, happy days, we're going to be picking up the 3 points. But obviously that wasn't the case. We did everything in our power to get the 3 points, though the effort was there. The energy was relatively there. There were a couple lapses, but you can't have a perfect performance, especially in an Everton shirt. So we shouldn't think that's particularly surprising. Now, my player of the game could go to Jarrad Branthwaite, but I'm going to give it to Abdoulaye Doucoure because I think he did a pretty good job today. Obviously, we need him to be a workhorse. That is the bare minimum, and he lived up to that title today. But he did a lot of the little things right. There were a couple times where he was involved in some really good build-up play. There were a couple times where he was able to get a couple of forwards through, to have an opportunity at scoring with a couple little dink passes, if you know what I mean. He didn't really take time to possess the ball, and that's what we needed. We need that unpredictability. But he also, he was worrying the Wolves players because in the second half, you could see they were tugging at his shirt. He was really looking to advance the ball and carry the ball. He was doing that quite well. And he was also doing well to, disrupt things for Wolves between both boxes. On their wings, he would disrupt any form of cross and ensure that the ball was going out of play, averting threat. And also at our end, he was really ensuring that Wolves didn't have an exit most of the time. And that was a really positive thing to see as well. So I think he had a really good all-round game. At least definitely improved on the first 2 games of the season. Obviously missed a sitter, but we've also got to remember that he's not a striker, nor is he really a number 10 either. So he did basically everything right. He would have had a goal to his name as well, and it could have been the decisive one as well. So I think he did a lot right. But that being said, Jarrad Branthwaite had an excellent game today. He just looked so composed, so calm on the ball, very assertive. Every time the ball went near him, he didn't really look phased by the pressure or anything of the sort. His distribution wasn't too bad as well. And then he had a couple shots on goal as well, which, for a first game, you're a little bit rusty. It's to be expected that you probably aren't scoring, but it was good to see that he was actually getting his head to a couple of corners, especially when we were lacking from that source. And we talk about the corners, the set pieces, they were pretty poor. Ashley Young was the guy that was given that responsibility, and he didn't really live up to it. I would have loved to see James Garner get a little bit more of a run And speaking of which, he needs to play in a position which is benefiting him more greatly, because the creativity is lacking, and that left-hand side which he is on, or right-hand side, in front of Patterson, that side is really getting exposed, and obviously Patterson likes to play narrow, and with James Garner obviously, or usually out of position, it's causing quite a few problems on that side, and Wolves were getting a lot of their opportunities from that side. It actually wasn't the side where the goal came from, but we are probably giving them a few too many chances. We're delivering some opportunities on a platter for them, and it's not going to be sustainable in some games this year, especially against much more damaging teams. We're talking about a team we played today who were 19th. They had not, I don't think they had scored. They hadn't won a game, or they may have scored one, but still, you get my point. Like, they weren't as clinical as some teams you're going to get this season. Basically, all the teams you're going to get. So with us getting exposed like that, that's a little bit of a concern. But that being said as well, we were incredibly stiff to concede or to lose. Just, if you look at the shots, one shot on target we conceded, and we also gave away 0 corners. So pretty disciplined in our penalty box that we were protecting. We looked pretty comfortable. Aerially, they were trying to send it up there. Every time we dealt with it, pretty much. In the midfield, there was a lift in there. Idrissa Gana Gueye, though, he had an awful first half. He was slow on the ball. His reaction time was pretty shit. The crowd were willing the ball out of his possession because he was just so not present, if you know what I mean. Like, the passes were toying with danger, and they were, a lot of the time, back passes. So, yeah, I think you've got to find a way to get James Garner in the middle, send Garner to the bench, and then potentially have Beto up front once you actually get him in. He's got to be playing next week. Danjuma probably plays on the wing, and look, happy days. I mean, it'll probably make for a little bit better viewing. We'll also talk about another striker that did get his chance in the second half for about 25 minutes. Chermiti, he was pretty good. He got involved with the goal, but he also was pretty physical. His hold-up play wasn't too bad. He didn't look like a 19-year-old, which is always a good thing, especially for a team that doesn't really have time for development. We need impact now players. Chermiti did pretty well in that regard. I think that move to send Dobbin off and then to bring Danjuma out wide to that flank that Semedo had been guarding all day, I think that was a really good idea, because Semedo was on a yellow. Lewis Dobbin had a pretty good game in terms of just attacking. I think that was a great battle. Those two, obviously, you had the push and pull dynamic. You know, Dobbin was going at Semedo, and Semedo was holding up well. I think Dobbin's attitude in not getting bogged down by being told no, basically, he just kept on going. And I think that was ultimately where he was able to source that yellow card from by Semedo, because of that, you know, willingness to just drive the ball forward. And he's got a little bit of craft with the ball as well. So obviously he's going to be some sort of asset this season. I don't know in what capacity, but definitely a nice little energetic boost to at least have off the bench. I think that is something that we benefited from strongly, especially in the first half, where the dominance was more felt. It was that energy, it was that vibrance, you know, that we were playing with. The midfield really helped that as well. Amadou Onana had a very strong showing, especially in the first half as well, you know, with his passing, with his defending, his interceptions, all that sort of stuff. He was pretty instrumental in what we were doing in the first half, and even in the second half, with some of his tackling efforts as well. So definitely a lift in performance from a lot of players, and it really helps when you've got some more reliable players, or you're actually getting rid of the players that are just completely liable to what you're doing. So that was excellent to see. Nathan Patterson, I mean, he didn't have a great game by his standards, but obviously some of that comes down to who's playing higher up the pitch and where that support comes from. And also, I mean, I don't think like, he had some good phases. There were a couple crosses that he sent in. He had a little bit of time and a little bit of breathing room to actually send it into the box. They were perfectly weighted. Perfectly. And we were pretty stiff to not get a score from those because they were in some really good areas, the players on the receiving end of those crosses. But I just cannot believe we're having this conversation again. It happens every single week. I mean, the Aston Villa game aside, it is baffling to me that we're talking about a loss here. I mean, this game could have been a 3-goal game, a 4-goal game, a 5-goal game, because we talk about the Wolves offside call as well. There was one where Jordan Pickford and Tarkovsky had a little bit of a mare communicating, and we were lucky to not concede there. That should have been the wake-up call for us. That should have been the wake-up call, and that should have been, that something should have clicked in our brains, as if to say, they are giving you the opportunity to win. They got given opportunities after you dominated. They didn't take them. You need to take them now. And here we are talking about 3 more dropped points, 0 from 9. I'm just going to summarize our season for you. We have had 43 shots, 18 on target, 8 big chances, an XG of about 5, and 0 goals. To add to that, SofaScore, which is a nice little tracking stats app, the top 2 performances this season have come from goalkeepers, and those 2 goalkeepers are goalkeepers that played against Everton, Fulham, Leno, and Sarr Wolves. It's absolutely crazy. So, I mean, we've got Sheffield next week, and look, I think there was a comment I found on Twitter which I think sums it up incredibly well. Even though we didn't set expectations for this game, the bar is that low, we're somehow still disappointed. I don't think a team can drive you to such a hellish place more so than Everton. So that's going to do it. Right now, we don't look like scoring. Hopefully, we've got reinforcements by next weekend. I think the transfer window is done by then as well. So hopefully, we've got players locked in to make an impact immediately with regards to our attacking threat. Because right now, it just lacks everything. Actually, it doesn't. We've got the creativity. We're getting into good spots now. It's just the last end product kind of possession. It always falls apart at that point. We overuse it. Sometimes we fucking stumble over our own 2 feet, and the ball sometimes gets away from us. And then the goalkeeper decides to have a ridiculous performance, as if things couldn't be any more difficult for this football club. I think the footballing gods really enjoy watching Everton and Everton fans suffer. Anyway, that'll do it. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.